Afternoon. This is Pat Cruzy with Big Iron Livestock. This is the Livestock Market Wrap Up. And I've got Daryl Holliday with me of Country Futures out of Frankfort, Kansas. And Daryl, we were just talking a little bit ago before we started, seeing all-time new highs in the markets as it closes today. And we've got a lot of little items we're going to talk about. I would come out and share with you last week. Again, little to no trade in Wyoming, Colorado, but quite a little trade picking up again in South Dakota, Nebraska, Kansas, with these video auctions and some local markets that were trading. Overall, South Dakota, Nebraska on these 7.5 weights were 5 to 10 higher at 373 to 378. In the southern trade in Kansas, was mixed to 3 higher at 370 to 374. And I put this up here, and you can help tell us where we ended up closing. I had this up earlier at 351.27, 351.40, but where did we close at today?
Well, that contract is the September contract you're referring to. Yes, you have, and it's closed at 350.92. Of course, this came off of a big break we had at one time last week, coming off the anticipation. When markets get this high, they become real fickle and extremely, they wake up nervous and they go to bed nervous. And, they started talking about Secretary Rollins going to have the big announcement of this on the screwworm policy with Mexico, and more rumors for 48 hours. It was like, okay, she's going to open that border. And we just sagged, and we sagged hard on Thursday and Friday until she announced and said, and I'm not really, nothing, this really didn't shock me because I listened to a lot of their scientists talk on podcasts, and they don't feel comfortable. They have it taken care of. People forget about the wildlife problem. Bottom line, I don't need to go through the whole thing.
Yeah.
They're doing their best to keep those flies and move them south. And she does not open the border. And the more you listen to that her comments, you believe that you really can't tell you when that's going to be in the foreseeable future. And that is, the bottom line is that's in the picture, that's 1 million head a year that was coming into the United States. That wouldn't solve all the issues, but the market's just got to ration supplies. And that's what it's doing. It's ration feeder supplies, ration beef supplies in a market that has very strong demand.
Right. So let's talk about this chart. We've brought this up a time or two over the last 6 months, but we're seeing now the percentage of heifers in the heifer to steer kill hitting kind of all-time lows here, it looks like. What's your thoughts here?
Well, what I think this does is confirm that when you look back, you go back 4 or 5 months ago, which that was the spring, that we definitely felt there was some retention beyond the standard retention that was occurring. We're starting to build the herds, be the spring herds, and this is probably certainly an indication that is true. Now that it's too early to just say, draw that conclusion, but it also the anecdotal data kind of confirms it too, from the standpoint feeder prices are really high. Part of it, the fact is those feeders are not inside the ring or on the video if you're trying to sell. There's less of them. And so that's the process. Of course, those cattle are, going to calve. Theoretically, they'll calve next spring. And then they will become, if you start with that first, they theoretically will have a calf, and it would start to have some impact in 27 beef production. But we have to see whether that, these numbers pan out. But really, if you go back and look, people who have watched this long, they know that we've shared this a lot of times when we think that there's a significant move. And really, this has been the most significant move. And I'll say that because of notice that we went below the last year in the 5-year average here in August, when normally that percentage is actually starting to go up.
Right.
Yeah. So that's what would show me that we're doing. There's some things, that confirms to me the retention. The amount is always hard. We're not trying to, but you kind of want to know where you're at. And I think it kind of confirms why feeder cattle supplies are dramatically tight. And it's also going to tell you why fed cattle supplies right through the end of the year, there's not numbers coming at us. It's also why there's less cattle to buy right now, right? From Packers are seeing this, so that's
Yeah.
why I wanted to put that in there.
Right, right. Very good. Yep. No, that's good. We've been talking about this for a few months,
Mm-hmm.
and that is interesting that as you look at that chart that the 5 year and last year you start to see an increase, and it's those probably those
Yeah.
yearling heifers
Mm-hmm.
coming to
Right.
market in
Right.
the end
Right.
of August out of the Flint Hills and the
Right.
Sand
Right. Right.
Hills.
Right.
So
Right. Right. Yeah.
I just, yeah, made a few notes. Again, this market has been resilient. We've been chopping around and bouncing off this 350 range or 350 top end, and we kind of the market did go through that today, and with a pretty good strong close.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing that I was reading that I'd like to have your comments on is uh, the processors, and we talked about this a little bit before. What's different this time around versus in 14 through 16 with the processors and the kill um, that you we haven't talked about.
Yeah. With a what happened, what I think this is just extremely interesting, and it illustrates so many things. The number one underlying point is it illustrates the demand for protein and specifically beef protein. And let me explain why I say that. Back in 2014 and 16, when the numbers started falling off dramatically and prices started climbing, and now keep in mind, we're talking about prices that topped out in the cash market at 170 in Nebraska. Okay, to give some so
Yeah,
when we were getting those price levels, Packer just said, "Let's shut down." They're shutting down plants, and we lost slaughter capacity. Slaughter capacity in that whole period of that whole thing went from 525,000 down to 475,000 on a weekly basis of fed cattle slaughter. Well,
mhm.
what's happened this time? As we have continued to matter of fact, we've now gone from 475 up to 500,000. And when we get the new plant in full tilt in Nebraska, we'll be setting really doggone close to basically 510,000 head. Well,
Right.
goodness sake. So you recovered all that slaughter, not all of it, but a big bunch of that slaughter capacity. And we've done it because they see the demand for beef and other proteins, I might say. And unfortunately, just don't have the cattle. But I think most of these people that have made these investments in the new plants are, they're in it for the long haul and they see the long term demand. And when the supplies come up, they want to be able to do it, the process. But I do still feel that there's a good chance that some of the older, less efficient plants are going to go down. But most of
Mm.
people have really thought that some regional player would have to go away, if you will, during this, and they still might. But I will say
Yeah.
this about what regionals don't understand is they don't have near the fixed costs in their whole system. And number two, almost every one of them have a very good niche market from a marketing standpoint on the other side. They're not out there selling, they're not out there processing slaughter cows, selling, commodity beef. No, no, no.
Yeah.
They have a very particular export market or domestic market that they're trying to hit. And so if they're doing that and they can keep their customers, they're going to be right there bidding right there. And so I think it'll be interesting to watch it happen, but it's interesting how it's just the opposite of what happened during the tighter supplies in 2014-16. I thought it was
Yeah.
really a good point to make today is that look what's happened during this time now. When we go back and look at this time period, you go, well, we went from 2013 to 2025-26, and we actually saw slaughter capacity go up from
Right.
475 to 510. And that's what is proof about regarding the demand.
Yeah, and speaking of demand, we really haven't seen the consumer back off,
Yeah.
and what I was reading this morning is we'll see it kind of in stair steps at the retail outlet, depending on the stores. Store by store, we'll start to increase prices, and this is where we'll see, you know, how how far this thing can go before the mother in the household starts really backing off of.
Yeah.
of course,
Yeah.
ground
That's right.
beef or some of the steaks and more choice products there. So
Yep. Yep.
very
I
good.
agree. It is, and it'll be interesting as we go into the fourth quarter. I all along have really thought the top price 2 years. I thought the top price in the cattle market would come in the fourth quarter of 2025. I will admit I don't know as I thought we'd be to 245 before we get there, but I still think that will be could very well be a top. Although I now don't really see a big increase in 2026. As a matter of fact, it's worth noting that in the WASD that was out this week, uh, well, on the U.S. on supply demand, they lowered 25 beef production in the United States and they lowered 26 beef production again. Once again, I think that's tied to the lack of Mexican feeder cattle coming into this market.
Right, right. Yeah, very good. Well, as always, appreciate your input and all of the thoughts that you share with us and all of our customers. Daryl, I guess we'll hang on tight, buckle in, and we'll see what happens this week. But
Okay. All right.
appreciate your time, and we'll catch you next Monday.
Thanks, Pat.
All right, thank you.